And you're good to go.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our DACA Updates and Resources webinar. We are letting people into the room and we'll begin shortly. We'll just give people a few minutes or a minute or so to come onto the forum, and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our Pima Community College webinar on DACA, providing some updates on what is happening with DACA and some resources available in our community. I will get started in just a moment with introductions and an overview. I see that there's been a pause in how many are coming in, so I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for what I know will be an informative webinar. My name is Yolanda Gonzalez, and I serve as Pima Community College's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. Tonight, we have 3 different panels. The first will provide information about the latest information on DACA. The second will be about resources available for our documented and undocumented students. And the third will be about the experiences of students here in Arizona and ways to get involved. Before we get started, we have our Provost and Chancellor to provide a welcome and framing for our discussion today. It is my pleasure to introduce our academic leader, who is committed to student access and success and works every day to build a climate where we can all feel like we belong at Pima Community College. She was recently selected as one of 24 national leaders to participate in the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities inaugural Presidential Leadership Academy, La Academia de Liderazgo. Our Provost, Dolores Duran Cerda.
Thank you, Hilda. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. I would like to ground us in the knowledge that we gather on the traditional, cultural, and ancestral lands of the Tohono O'odham and of the Pascua Yaqui. Our indigenous brothers and sisters, who are often represented as being part of the past, are very much still here and active in the community. As an educational institution that values learning, I invite you to learn more about the lands on which we live, work, and learn. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. My name is Dr. Dolores Duran Cerda, and I am Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Pima Community College. I would like to welcome all of you to Pima Community College's DACA Updates and Resources Forum. Me da mucho gusto de estar aquí entre todos ustedes en este foro para compartir información y recursos que están disponibles para nuestros estudiantes DACA. I'd also like to thank our moderator, Hilda Ladner, Executive Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, for being our moderator, and she will be facilitating tonight's event. To today's panelists, I would like to express our gratitude on behalf of Pima Community College for the time, guidance, dedication, and commitment you have continuously provided to help support our DACA and undocumented students, not only at Pima, but also with other institutions. More than ever, we need to do all we can to make college campuses a safe and supportive environment for DACA and undocumented students, and make sure they have the resources they need to earn their degrees without exceptional risk and financial hardship. I'd like to share my own personal story with you. Before I became an administrator at Pima College, I was a faculty member in the World Languages Department at the downtown campus for 10 years. I taught Spanish for heritage learners, native speakers, And I was a faculty member when SB 1070 passed, and I saw how it directly affected students, my students. Students stopped coming to class. They were afraid to come to class. They disappeared. Later, I found out some of them were deported. When the Daca program came into being, I was approached by several students who asked me for letters of character, which I enthusiastically wrote. And you know, my decision to stay in administration actually was related to Daca because at that time, Maricopa Community College School District, they had put into place a policy for for in-state tuition for Daca students. Pima College followed suit after that. And I was part of that team that provided that policy. And that's what made me decide to stay in administration because of the impact that I knew I could have for all students. Administration at any institution needs to show heart. We at Pima are with our students. We care about our community. However, we are limited by state laws that prevent us from doing more. But we do what we are able to do within the parameters. For example, at Pima, we have Hilda Ladner and Yolanda Gonzalez, who's one of our panelists tonight, who lead the Immigrant and Refugee Student Resource Center, which is part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office and is under my leadership as Provost. This Student Resource Center is an excellent way for our students to access support, information, and resources. Some other ways are, for example, we have scholarships through the foundation. We have 2 scholarships that help our Dreamer and Daca students. One is called Dreamers and Beyond, and the other one is called the Dream Fund. If our community members or employees would like to donate, you could also go to the pimafoundation.org website and donate through there. Employees may also do a payroll deduction and identify a specific fund. I'd also like to mention for the high school counselors and high school students, we have dual enrollment courses, and that is available to all students so they can access college classes. In addition, Pima recently by the Board of Governors approved STU classes, STU classes to be free for students this semester. So please keep that in mind. And there are many other resources that our panelists will be sharing, such as United We Dream, the National Immigration Law Center, Harvard Law Today, to mention a couple. There are national organizations, HAKU and LULAC, who also support and advocate for Daca students. Once again, thank you for joining us today. We hope this is the beginning of a continuous supportive dialogue con nuestra comunidad. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Pima Community College's Chancellor, Lee Lambert, who will be providing some welcoming remarks. He is a staunch supporter of social justice, of the equity agenda, and is committed to student success, including finding solutions to better serve our Daca and undocumented students. Please help me welcome Chancellor Lee Lambert. Lee?
Thank you, Dolores, and good late afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining us for this very important discussion around Daca. I first want to acknowledge that we have board member Mark Hanna that has joined us today, and Mark has been a very staunch champion for all of our students and really especially for our Daca students. I'm not sure if any of our other board members have joined us, but I want to just recognize that we would not be able to do what we do at Pima without the support of our governing board. So thank you, Mark, and other board members if you happen to be joining with us. Also, I just want to recognize again and thank you to Hilda and to Yolanda, and also recognize that they oversee the Immigrant and Refugee Student Resource Center. And that was an important piece of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at the college. And just so you all have a context for this, until more recently, I believe the college never had a formal diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And so I'm so proud that our board, myself, and the leadership team and all the employees of the college really rallied behind the importance of having a true plan that encompasses so much of our commitment to social justice and to equity and being able to support our DACA students. Also want to thank all of you DACA students who are joining us tonight, and I want to thank the panelists who will be speaking a little later. Also, as the Provost mentioned, and it kind of breaks my heart in many ways that the laws in this country have made it very difficult for all of you DACA students to really be students at Pima or any other college or university by cutting off and making it difficult to afford the ability to participate in our institutions of higher learning. But Pima has been working hard to do its part to change that trajectory. As you all know, prior to the change in the law in the state of Arizona, Pima's board was overwhelmingly supportive of in-state tuition. Not only were they overwhelmingly supportive of in-state tuition, when things started to shift in this state, our board supported a friend of the court brief to support Maricopa's district's legal case. Also, the board has supported our efforts to be a signatory to the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration, supporting DACA and Dreamers. And we've been advocating in Washington, D.C. for the DREAM Act. We do that each and every year when we go back to the Hill. And we were so pleased that the United States Supreme Court did not overturn the DACA law, and we signed on with amicus brief challenging the current administration's ability to just unilaterally and arbitrarily and capriciously change that program. So let me just add just a few other pieces. And when we think about our work around immigration, around supporting immigrants and refugees, it's in a broader context of social justice. And Pima has really made it an important part of our DNA to do what we can to support each and every one of you students and to be in partnership with our community as part of that effort. But also I want you to know this is not just a professional calling for me, this is personal for me. And for those of you who don't know much about me, so my father is from North Carolina, but my mother is from South Korea. So I was born in Seoul. And because I was born to an American father, I had a certain privilege. As long as he filled out the consular report of birth abroad, that recognized my citizenship. I could be like so many of you, born to parents in another country, coming to the US and not being recognized. So I'm very sensitive to that I've been one of the fortunate folks. So I don't lose sight of the reality because it's personal. And I want to make sure that each of you, that we can stand by you, do what we can do within the parameters of what we're allowed to do as a publicly funded and recognized institution of higher learning. So with that, I believe I turn it back over to you, Hilda.
Yes, thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Provost Duran-Cerda and Chancellor Lambert for your words today and for joining us this evening. I forgot to say earlier, y lo voy a decir en español, si desean interpretación en español, por favor oprimen el botón donde dice interpretación y pueden escoger español y ahí van a oír esta presentación en español. So I just said that if somebody would like Spanish interpretation or would like to hear this in Spanish, you can click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. So now let me introduce our first panel. They are going to provide some of the legal updates regarding the DACA program here in the US and some of what's happening throughout the nation and here in Arizona. So our two panelists, I will introduce them and then we'll get started with Jeffrey Silvan. Jeffrey Silvan is the General Counsel for Pima Community College. He was appointed as the first General Counselor for PCC for the district in 2013. Previously, he spent 5 years as general counsel for the Morris and Stuart Udall Foundation, a federal agency based in Tucson, devoted to environmental conflict resolution and education. His legal career began with 15 years in private practice, focused on employment law and commercial litigation, including representing Pima College. Jeff served as vice chair for the Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee of the American Bar Association section on environment, energy, and resources, and is an adjunct faculty for the James E. Rogers College of Law at the University of Arizona. He is former chair of the Arizona State Bar Labor and Employment Law section. Jeff grew up in Tucson and then ventured east, receiving a BA in International Studies from Johns Hopkins University and then a JD from the University of California, Los Angeles School of Law in 1992. He is admitted to practice in Arizona and California. Our other panelist on this legal panel is Maurice Mo Goldman. He works in Tucson, Arizona at Goldman & Goldman PC. He holds a JD MBA from Hofstra University. He graduated from Syracuse University with a BS in journalism. His law practice is focused only on immigration-related matters, including employment-based, family-based, asylum, removal defense, and other humanitarian-based immigration issues. Mr. Goldman has served on multiple national American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, committees. He is the recipient of the 2010 AILA Joseph McKinsey Young Lawyer Award and the 2018 Randy Tunak Courage in Immigration Award. Mo previously served as the AILA Arizona chapter chair. He was previously a trustee to the American Immigration Council and sat on boards of the Assista Border Action Network and Immigration List. So please, let's welcome Jeff Silva to begin this panel.
Thanks, Ilda. I guess just by way of a quick further explanation. So as general counsel, I'm employed directly by Pima College, so I only represent Pima College, provide legal service to the college, and manage our outside legal services. So I thought I'd kick things off by just giving a little context to explain why things are the way they are at Pima College with respect to DACA students. So back in 2006, voters passed Proposition 300 that limited benefits and opportunities for individuals without lawful immigration status. And then there was disagreement about exactly what that meant and how to interpret the law, which is often the case. And in 2013, Maricopa and community colleges decided that it was within the interpretation of the law to grant in-state tuition to students who had been approved in the DACA program. Unfortunately, there soon erupted a dispute over that decision, and the Arizona Attorney General filed a lawsuit challenging that interpretation of the law. In May of 2018, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled against in-state tuition for DACA students. So at Pima, beginning in fall of 2018, we had to begin charging DACA students the full out-of-state tuition rate. But there are also a couple of other implications of that decision because the way the Supreme Court, Arizona Supreme Court, interpreted the law, DACA does not convey either lawful immigration status or presence for those individuals in the program. And as a result of that, DACA holders cannot receive certain public benefits that are subsidized by public funds. So that's what resulted in the change of the tuition at Pima College. So just one thing to be clear about, it does not affect the ability of someone to enroll at Pima College. So someone in the DACA program or someone with no documentation, there's no barrier to enrolling at Pima College. The issue is the tuition. So why does Pima have to charge students in the DACA program the out-of-state tuition? Well, as I mentioned, one of the implications of the Arizona Supreme Court decision is that the college cannot use public funds to subsidize the education provided to students who are part of the DACA program. So at Pima, the in-state tuition rate only covers about 1/3 of the cost to Pima College to provide the education. The non-resident tuition rate is approximately what it costs Pima to educate each student. So that's where that charge level comes from. one question that comes up from time to time is, well, why doesn't Pima offer 150% of its resident tuition rate? That's what they're doing at the state universities. Well, that's because of what I explained before about the cost. So at the state universities, their non-resident tuition rate includes a significant markup over their actual cost of instruction. So for them, 150% of their resident tuition is at about that approximation of cost, just like at Pima, the approximation of cost is the out-of-state tuition rate. So that's why that's why the tuition rate is set the way it is. And really, unfortunately, at this point, given the way the law has been interpreted, the only way that's going to be able to be changed at Pima is we need either a change of Arizona law or we need a change at the federal level. If either of those were to happen, Pima could revisit the tuition rate. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the main implications for the current status of the interpretations regarding DACA at Pima College.
I guess I jump in here, right, Jeff? So good evening, everyone. My name is Mo Goldman. I'm an immigration attorney here in town. And I'm going to just give you a quick overview about the status of the DACA program in light of the Supreme Court decision back in June. And actually, as of today, we found out what the current policy is and how it's going to be implemented by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. So I'm just going to give you an overview on that, and then I'm sure there are some questions, and at the end of this whole panel event, we'll take questions. So just to give everyone an overview, the DACA program, as I think most or all of you probably know, went into effect June 15, 2012, and had very specific requirements in order to qualify for DACA. Back in 2017, in September, the current administration tried to rescind DACA, and ultimately that was challenged and went to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court back on June 18th of this year found that the process utilized by the administration was in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act and was unlawful. And the Supreme Court sent the DACA program basically back to the Department of Homeland Security for some further action. But in doing so, the Supreme Court said that the program could be restored to its original form. Since 2017, since the rescission of DACA, the only part of the program that still exists are for people who have already applied for DACA previously and are now getting renewals. And so that's still been ongoing. But the Supreme Court decision ordered the administration to accept new initial applications for people who would qualify even under the original program back in 2012 for initial applications, and also for advanced parole, which is travel authorization for some who need to travel internationally. So where did it go from there? Well, it went back to the USCIS and Department of Homeland Security, and the Secretary of DHS, Chad Wolf, came out on July 28th and basically said that the program will no longer accept any initial applications. So even after the Supreme Court decision, we were very suspicious of whether any new DACA or initial DACA applications would be accepted. And it turns out that our suspicions were correct, that they are not going to be accepting new initial applications. And so what that means in reality, well, it came out today, and I've got it right here, that the government will now reject all initial DACA requests. So anyone that has never received DACA previously should not file, because if you file for DACA, they will reject it and return the filing fees. The rejections what they are doing is they're rejecting them without prejudice. What that means to you in real English is that if DACA does come back in full in the future, you could then apply for initial application. So having this rejected will not prevent you in the future from filing. They will continue to accept requests from people who have originally received DACA and are renewing it. However, those renewals will no longer be for 2 years. They're only going to issue 1-year employment authorization cards, which is truly unfortunate. And if you have an old DACA permit that you've misplaced and you still have more than a year left remaining on it, they will give you that additional time. But if it's an extension of your previous one, you'll only get 1 year. Let me see, what else is there? If you want to apply for advanced parole, travel permission, which allows you to exit the US, they're only going to do it in very limited circumstances. And that is under urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. And they list as examples if you have to travel to support national security interests of the United States, or if you have to travel because of the concern about immediate safety or well-being of an immediate relative, like a mother or father in the other country, but particularly the minor children of the applicant. So if you have children and you need to travel because you have to do something, from especially a medical perspective, then you do so. It is not recommended to travel internationally at all, unless there's an urgent need to do so, especially right now, currently with the climate of coronavirus and also the uncertainty of whether the person will even be admitted. Filing for advanced parole is not cheap either. It's like $540 or something. So you don't want to spend the money on an application and then find out you won't get it accepted. The other thing that's important in the implementation policy that they issued today, they clearly state that you have to file for your renewal request, renewal of the DACA, within 150 and 120 days, so 5 to 4 months prior to the expiration of your current DACA status. If you file outside of 150 days, so say you file it 6 months before it expires, they could reject it as being premature. One of the strategies we've been employing over the last couple of years is because they're taking a lot longer to process those applications. We were filing them more than 150 days before, but you have to just, be careful of that now. I don't know if they're going to be more stringent based off of what they've written here, but just watch out for that, because that could give them a basis for a rejection, and then you have to refile it again. And most likely, if it was rejected in that circumstance, you'd get the fees returned to you. So again, remember that employment authorization, that's the card that you get when you're approved for DACA, is only going to be valid for 1 year going forward. And a lot really depends on what happens with the upcoming election, because obviously there are two divergent viewpoints on DACA. I mean, we're going to see one end of the spectrum or the other, most likely, after the election in November. So it really just depends on, where things will go with, especially with the political climate, to be able to dictate whether the 1 year extension policy will remain in place, or the maybe 2 years comes back in the future. Let me think. Oh, the other thing to keep in mind is And it's always important to be aware of anytime you're filing an application to USCIS, and this shouldn't be as big a concern for renewals, you are providing your information, your private information to the government. And the question always comes up, well, could they use that to track me down or use it against me? There is that risk. It's always there. Now, hopefully that doesn't come to pass, but I think especially for extensions or renewals, it's not as much of a concern as it would be for initial applicants, because the government's already they've already got your information. So, the risk is already, been challenged on that. So I think, the bottom line going forward is keep an eye on the instructions on the policies. If you're applying for DACA, definitely, reach out to organizations like Scholarships AZ and other local organizations who often will reach out to me to review the applications or to give them some input, especially on more challenging ones. And then again, we're just going to have to wait and see. I think most likely the new policy that just came out the past day is going to be challenged, and we're going to see what the courts do with it, because they're going to probably face a challenge that this policy is in direct conflict with the Supreme Court decision. And I will turn it back over to Hilda, I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your legal perspective. It's something that's changing quickly. Every day there seems to be something new in the news. So please know that our Immigrant and Refugee Student Resource Center is here to help you navigate what is happening and connect you to others. So now we're going to go on to our resource panel. And before we do that, I would like to just remind you to please submit your questions using the Q&A feature, and to know that we'll answer questions towards the end. There's the interpretation button as well. So let me introduce our next panel. They will be talking about some resources available here in the community and throughout Arizona. So on our next panel, we have Reina Montoya, who is a documented social entrepreneur, educator, and dancer. Reina is the founder and CEO of Aliento. She is an alumni of Arizona State University, Grand Canyon University, and Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Reina was born in Tijuana, Mexico, 15 minutes from the US and Mexico border, and migrated to Arizona in 2003, fleeing violence. Despite the fear, anxiety, and stress of growing up undocumented in Arizona and witnessing her dad go through deportation proceedings, Reina did not lose hope. That is why she took a leap of faith and decided to create Aliento in 2016, after years of organizing and educating both at the local and national levels. Through youth-led arts and healing workshops, leadership development, and community organizing, Aliento transforms trauma into hope and action for those most impacted by the harms associated with lacking in immigration status. Less than 4 years ago, Aliento has touched the lives of over 25,000 people, of which 15,000 are youth. The second panelist is Carolina Silva. She is the Executive Director of Scholarships A to Z and came to the U.S. at the age of 9 from Lima, Peru. Her work is situated at the intersection of education, immigration, and equity. She began organizing as an undocumented college student in Salt Lake City, Utah, and received her PhD in Cultural Studies and Social Thought in Education at Washington State University. Prior to joining Scholarships AZ, Carolina was a congressional fellow with the Education and Labor Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. In her spare time, Carolina enjoys reading, cooking, and exploring the Tucson landscape. And then third on our panel will be our own Yolanda Gonzalez. She is a proud daughter of Mexican immigrants from Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, who resettled in Barrio Viejo, one of the oldest barrios in the heart of downtown Tucson, a place they call home and where they continue to practice their faith, culture, and heritage, and planted their roots. Coming from a family of activists, Yolanda is an advocate for social justice and serves diverse communities and holds a history of a commitment and deep-rooted sense of passion for her people, education, and student success. She graduated from Tucson High School and attended Pima Community College. Her undergraduate coursework includes an Associate's in Sociology, a Bachelor of Science in Management, and is currently working on a Master of Science in Management and Leadership this fall. She is the coordinator for our Immigrant and Refugee Student Resource Center, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that. But we'll go ahead and get started with Reina and Aliento. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Hilda, for such a nice introduction. I'm so honored to be here today with Pima Community College and these amazing panelists. I'm so excited that all of them are women. So rooting out and shout out to all the women on the workforce, especially during this pandemic. As you mentioned, my name is Reina Montoya. I am right now currently a Daca recipient myself, and I am the founder and CEO of Aliento. I was born in Tijuana, Mexico, and at the age of 10, I had my first migration, which was internal in Mexico. I didn't know at that time the reason why we were migrating. I was just in the 5th grade. My parents came to pick me up. They pulled me out of school, and that was the last time that I saw my teachers and that I saw my friends. So at a young age, I started developing a lot of anxiety. I started developing a lot of internal struggles about, in one hand, having to see my parents work so hard, and then yet building this inner resentment towards them, if I can be very vulnerable about, like, why are they taking everything that I know from me without knowing the context? Later on, at a later age, I found out that my father, unfortunately, had been a victim of state violence, where he was kidnapped by Mexican police, and he had to endure so much trauma, and he had to be so courageous to make that decision from one, migrating internally first in Mexico, and then ended up here in Arizona, where I grew up. I went to junior high. I had my first dance. I had my first kiss. I learned how to drive, and eventually was very grateful to go to Arizona State University, where I got 2 bachelor's degrees. And as a little girl growing up undocumented with the constant fear and anxiety of not knowing if I was going to come home and got to see my parents back again, if I was going to be deported, and not having true access to in-state tuition really devastated me at a young age. But I like to say that I am one of the lucky ones that through the generosity of private donors, I was able to attend university, and that would have never been a possibility without the support of private donors, but also with the hustle and brightness of my mom and dad, who were my biggest cheerleaders, and them not graduating from high school. They figured out ways to get resources and knock on so many doors for me to go to college. So I like to say, and I'd like to really start with my story, because when I was in college, I then got to get really involved in the DREAM movement, and right in the peak of SB 1070. I know that, Dolores, you mentioned about the impact that you had as a teacher while SB 1070. For me, it was as a student, and having to see the deep fear in my mom's eyes really shook me. So at that moment, I started to organize. I was 19. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I needed to do something. So 10 years after, I not only had the privilege to work alongside other undocumented brothers and sisters, but I had to fight the deportation of my dad. He was detained for 9 months, where I couldn't hug him, where I couldn't celebrate Christmas or birthdays or important dates. And that taught me so much about who I am, and the big sense of responsibility that we have in order to pay pathways for our young people that are still sitting in our classrooms, that are right now navigating a very difficult landscape, and what is our responsibility as adults who have already gone through that process to make the process a little bit easier, or at least more attainable for students. So I became a high school teacher. I taught English, Spanish, philosophy, and dance, and I was like, this is gonna be my way to make change. I had already tried the student organizing side. I had led national campaigns, and I was like, now it's my time after DACA to go into the classroom and pay it forward. So while I was teaching, I started noticing that many educators didn't have the tools and the resources to really equip the students. I suddenly became the immigration teacher at my school, and every single question related to higher ed access to immigration, all the students were funneled to me. which in a way I was really grateful because I got to build so many relationships with students and families, but yet at the same time, I knew it was not sustainable. What happens if something were to happen to Ms. Montoya? What's going to happen to the students that have fears, that have questions, that have dreams and desires, and where are the supportive adults? So at that moment, I started becoming very conflicted about, yes, in one hand, I can support my students, but what happens to the other students that don't have a Ms. Montoya? How do we make sure that we are able to build structures in place from the institutions to better support our student population that are undocumented or documented? So I, alongside 3 other colleagues, developed this curriculum that was then adopted by Teach for America to be training all their teachers, upcoming members, that to really understand what is the baseline understanding that teachers need to have in order to support this student population. How do we make sure that they have a holistic perspective, and how do we create that impact that it happens across schools and it doesn't have to be dependent on a Ms. Montoya? So later on, that's where I started really getting all these questions about, okay, I've been in this journey about creating new pathways where there hasn't been any trails before. So at that moment, I really had a hard question. Do I continue to create change in the classroom, or how can I continue to make sure that there's that institutionalized sustainability so we can ensure all students, regardless of immigration status, are served in a meaningful way? Because at the end of the day, if we deeply believe in education, we have to deeply believe in our students. And that takes time, and that takes resources, and that takes effort. So that's when I decided to found Aliento. Aliento translates into breath, but when you give aliento to someone, it's like giving words of encouragement. And we work in the intersection between education, mental health, the arts, and immigration. Because we might be thinking about the law and all the resources that we need for students to thrive, but what happens to the human spirit after you've been having so many doors closed in your face? What happens to the mental health of our young ones, or maybe the DACA or undocumented adults that never even made it to college because they didn't know how, because they didn't have that supportive teacher or mentor? So for me, it was really important about how do we create an ecosystem where we transform all that trauma and we put it into hope and action. So now, fast forward, while we're here, it's really to share a little bit of the resources that we have galvanized. As I said, we live in that intersection between education, mental health, the arts, and immigration. But through that, we have learned that COVID-19 is not going away anytime soon. And we also, as an organization, had to respond to the need. We surveyed over 500 families, and the top priorities of those families coming from mixed status families were around financial need, educational, and emotional support. Because people are in isolation, they don't have those resources. So what do we do in order to really support families as they're transitioning into an online and virtual learning? So that was something that we did. We were able to do an initiative where we're providing up to date close to 300 families with $500 cash assistance, where they're able to support, their needs, to be able to pay for rent. And then at this moment, as I'm wrapping up, what we really need to be thinking about as educators or folks who are thinking about supporting students, it's how do we make sure that when we're delivering resources, we do it from a human lens? The outcome is as important as the process. And if we don't have empathy and compassion as we're delivering these resources, then we're missing the mark. And we're missing to really supporting students. So what I'm gonna do, instead of telling you all the websites and all the resources, we have developed a couple of digital toolkits that I'm gonna leave on the chat for you all to access around DACA. We heard it from Mo, the ongoing changes come really, really fast. So we're putting up infographics, both in English and Spanish. We have a text alert system where you're able to really get all the resources that you need. If you're a teacher and you might be overwhelmed right now with all the responsibilities that you had, I was in your shoes not too long ago. You don't have to be an expert. We just really need you to be a co-inspirer and make sure that you believe in your students and that you're walking the resources with them through compassion and empathy. And you don't have to do it alone. We got your back, and just know that you can reach out to us at any moment. And I'll be dropping up all the digital resources in the chat. But thank you so much for having me, and I'll pass it over to Hilda.
Thank you so much for that, Reina. We really appreciate all of the work that you do with such passion and compassion for our fellow humans and in this very difficult time that we're all going through right now. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Carolina. Go ahead, Carolina.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for organizing this and being here today as an attendee or participant panelists. I'm Carolina Silva. I use she, hers, ella pronouns, and I joined Scholarships AZ as the new executive director on June 1st. I want to start off by acknowledging that today is the first day of school for a lot of university students, and it's actually been 10 years since I myself started my college journey as an undocumented student in Utah. And unfortunately, while I want to say that in the last 10 years, things have really changed for the better for undocumented students, I can't say that because it would be a false claim, right? Where there's a lot going on right now. And in some instances, some of the things that undocumented youth are experiencing today are not necessarily worse, but just as bad or almost more urgent today in our political climate. But what I can say is that despite the policies that at the federal level and in the state of Arizona, right, that are holding students back, what we have seen is a lot of young folks, the same undocumented people who are impacted by these policies, come together and create spaces of support where none existed. So that's where I want to talk about today. That is the story of Scholarships AZ, right? We're a product of community. We exist to meet the educational needs of undocumented students and families, and we're committed to doing that work while being youth vision, youth driven, and youth led. So Scholarships AZ, you know, we really believe that the most effective and equitable way to create educational interventions is to center the voices of undocumented students while also, of course, compensating them for their time and their energy. And I'm really glad that Reina talked about this political moment and the impact of the pandemic on our communities, because as we've seen, this is hitting communities of color, low-income communities in so many ways, but we know that for undocumented families in particular, right, this is just another thing that our families have to bear. So since I came into this role, and even before, Scholarships AZ has been responding to that immediate need, and we've been able to help almost 100 youth connected to our program with over $45,000 in funding for COVID response. And similar to the things Reina mentioned, right, we've seen that most of the undocumented youth that we've served have either lost their jobs or had significant cuts to their hours. About 80% identified food insecurity as a major concern, right? So we're really looking at essential needs. And then all the recipients of COVID relief funds actually reported that they would use the funds for rent and or utilities, telling us again that, you know, there's a huge need for essential resources, including, I guess, on the higher education level, emergency student funds or accessing like free food and other resources, which brings me a little bit to the best practices for higher education that I want to talk about today. I'll also share the resources we have, but I think it's really important to talk about how to implement this practice. And I'd love for educators on this call to basically have things that they could implement tomorrow. And some of these are those, and some of them are a little bit harder. So I'll just put it at that. And I think the first point I want to make is that federal policy is likely not going to change anytime soon. And yet neither is Arizona policy, right? We're going to work on that. With that said, while we work on that, there are things that institutions can do to make change. I think we've seen that at Pima with the creation of the Immigrant Refugee Student Resource Center, right? Like that is a tangible resource that can be created for students, even while state policies are also hindering students. So I want us to remember what we do have control over, because a lot of what I heard in the introduction was like, our hands are tied. And I understand that feeling, and that's frustrating. Yet there's also things that we can do as policy trickles down, right? We're seeing it right now, and how the CARES Act funding is trickling down. There are ways for undocumented folks and undocumented families to gain support. And I think if anything, it's up to us as educators and community leaders to find the ways that we can support students despite these policies. And in fact, even more because these policies exist, right, at an institutional level. It's up to us to be creative, to get together and say, what is it that we do have control over? So the second thing, right, first, that was my response to everything. The second thing is be visible as an educator. As Rita put it out, she became the immigration expert. That happens, right, across the board for young folks who do have a lived experience. I want to urge those of you that maybe don't even have the lived experience to be visible for your students. In the days where you were going to your office, having something right on your office that says, I support undocumented students, makes that student feel just that much safer, because they already have to, right, disclose their status in order to gain the support they need, which is a lot. So in COVID days, that may mean putting something in your signature, that may mean sharing that in your class introduction. Making yourself visible is always going to make it easier for students to reach out to you. The second piece would be to do the work to educate yourself. If you're attending this event, thank you, you're already doing a piece of that. And if you're not sure how to help an undocumented student, it's okay to acknowledge that. However, it's also your job to find out. So while we love referrals at Scholarships AZ, and we work with many students and educators, we often have folks who refer students to us. We also want to make sure that students have the support they need at their institution. So we will work with you. We do presentations, we do trainings, but we want to make sure that educators that are doing student support services know what those policies, right, what those policies and best practices are. So do follow us on social media. Do check out the toolkits we have available on our website. I will share some of those in the chat in a little bit as well. The third piece would be to find pathways to financially support undocumented youth. I say this again and again, but there is no better mentor for undocumented students than other undocumented students who have also lived the experience or who are also currently navigating those same systems. So on my previous institution, we actually were able to support students by creating mentor roles, and the mentors were able to get small scholarships, right, for the work that they did, supporting other students. These social networks mean everything when you're going through a system that is so difficult and when you feel like you're alone. And let's remember that by helping students out in this way, this is also something that is accessible to our most vulnerable students, right? Those students who don't have DACA, who are actually the large majority or a larger percentage of the students that are enrolling today, not because they're not eligible for DACA, right? But because they cannot apply and benefit from the program. And one of the last pieces I will leave to you is just asking yourself, what can I do today to take the burden off from the students' shoulders? Undocumented students are already dealing with all these anti-immigrant policies, financial insecurity in their household, everything, the emotional toll that it takes to be an undocumented person and just exist in this country as well as this state and navigate these structures and systems. So ask yourself, how can I listen to the student? What can I do to validate their experience rather than passing them off to the next educator or passing them off to Scholarships AZ? I mean, please do connect them, but how can you make that student feel supported right there and there? And of course, as you're, continuing to look for ways to support students and continuing to look for ways to create new resources and structures that will support our students, not just to survive, but to thrive, ask yourself, how can we let students have the lead in this effort? How can we ensure that these resources are not just created, but they are visioned and they are created and implemented in ways that are student-centered? Because I think that's one of the biggest pieces that administrators will often leave out. I like to say that student advocacy today is what will become best practices tomorrow, because that is often what happens across campuses across the nation. We saw it in the civil rights movement. We see it after with the ethnic studies movement, and then universities who've created all these student centers for multiculturalism. All of that came out of student advocacy. So let's ensure that we continue listening to students, we continue uplifting their work, and that we also give them the resources they deserve for the labor that they're doing, because that is what it is, labor. And I want to highlight 3 quick resources and that I will also share in the chat. The first, aside from our COVID Relief Fund, of course, is our Scholarships AZ scholarship list. We have a scholarship list that doesn't just highlight Arizona scholarships. It started out as that, but it also has national scholarships, so it's a great resource. We actually have like little monthly highlights that we post all over social media, so make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have our Immigrant Scholarship Hustle program, which is now in its 4th year. We call it ISH, and it is a space for undocumented students to really find community and empowerment. Students participate in a series of workshops where they're able to work with educators and peers. They're able to apply to 1 scholarship, create a professional resume, and leave with a finished personal statement that they can use for both college admission and scholarships. And our students really leave the program with supportive networks, with having access to community resources, and obviously the confidence that it takes to apply to jobs in college and everything else. Our ISH program in Tucson is going to start October 17th. So be on the lookout for the application. We'd love to share that with folks here, because we accept high school students as well as folks who may be transitioning from community college or who may have been out of high school for a bit. And then the third resource I want to share with y'all is that each year in the spring we have our educators conference, and this is really a space for educators across the state to come together and gain the tools needed to become better educator advocates. We have sessions for folks who want to learn like the Educator Ally 101 piece, as well as folks who have been doing this work for years and want to make work plans in terms of how to make their institutions more undocumented friendly. So with that, I want to thank all the other panelists for your ongoing work with and for undocumented families, and I will pass it back to Hilda.
Thank you so much, Carolina. Thank you for your passion and your advocacy. You all are doing such great work here in the Tucson area and throughout Arizona to support our documented and undocumented students. So thank you for that. So as we transition over to Yolanda, I am going to go ahead and play a short video about our Immigrant and Refugee Student Resource Center for you all. My apologies, I'm realizing that I didn't do a share sound, so you were probably just watching that, but I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick reshare and share the sound with you so that you can hear that whole video. Here we go again. And with that, I'll turn it over to Yolanda.
That video was a brief overview of the work we do at the Irsrc, and I want to give kudos to Teresa Perez She's one of our student ambassadors, and she created the video, so that was awesome work. Thank you, Teresa. Good evening. My name is Yolanda Gonzalez. My pronouns are she, her, a, and suya. I'm the program coordinator for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I lead the immigrant and refugee students for SAMA. I'm a proud daughter of Mexican immigrants, Alicia and Manuel Gonzalez. My parents had 10 children, so obtaining a college degree was financially tough for my parents. However, my father was a strong advocate for higher education. He really wanted us to be educated and have our degrees. So the only way he could do this was to go work at Pima College. So he worked there for 10 years. He was a custodian there. He took great pride in his work, and that's how he was able to start at Pima. So, you know, it just, we go way back because my father worked there. Some of my sisters worked there. So it's just like a big family thing that we do. We work at Pima. But it gives me, actually this year, I celebrate my 30-year anniversary as an employee at Pima, and it gives me great pride and privilege to be working with immigrant and refugee students. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to provide you with the PowerPoint. So that's just an overview of what I'm going to talk about, but I'll go ahead and skip that since we're a little bit for those of you that are I already did this part, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we have a new sticker, and it's the sticker on the left-hand side, side left, and it's I care and support immigrant and refugee students. So if you're wanting to have a sticker to post on your office or anywhere, right now you can post it on your computers or have it visible somewhere. Just email me and I'll go ahead and mail you some stickers. So the next slide is a little bit history of the Irsrc. So through the Student and Community Advocacy, the Irsrc was established in 2017, and our mission is to partner with the college and the community to gather resources to bridge the information gap and empower immigrants and refugee students to achieve their educational dreams. This semester, we were funded to hire additional ambassadors for 10 to 15 hours each to assist with this important work. So we're really happy about that. And then if you, there's some pictures of all of our ambassadors. The pictures of the squares are our previous ambassadors. The circle ones are our current ambassadors. So I'm just going to go over some of the Irsrc work and best practices. So during COVID, since March 2020, as we shifted to remote work because of the COVID-19, the Irsrc has served over 60 students using Google Meet, Zoom, and the old-fashioned phone calls. We're even using the three-way calling feature because a lot of times the parents want to be involved in the call. Or we're even, we do three ways to connect with other staff, like counselors or advisors. We also offered virtual hours. We're currently doing that right now. It's every day, and we provide students the opportunity to meet with me individually. And on several occasions, I have connected students to counselors, academic advisors, and assessment coaches. And I'm happy to say that we've had a great response. There have been times when I've really needed to talk to someone right away, and the response time has been really good, so I'm happy about that. And our students are able to, get going with their classes. We've also helped students with laptops. During this time, during the pandemic, we have been able to issue 80 laptops to students in need. So that's been very positive. And as a matter of fact, I just received an email this afternoon from one of the students that was pursuing a nursing degree, thanking me and letting me know that she was very happy about having the laptop, and it was very useful for her. So that's really good to hear. And then also our team has participated in professional development training. And we've also recently participated in welcoming last week school started for Pima students. So we were able to do a live session with our students and provide them information and resources. We're going to be working with the first year experience and the admissions and recruitment teams to offer live informational sessions. And then also our website is up. Yay! Our website is up to date, and we've been working with the marketing team, Lisa Broski, to establish a web page on the PCC website. So that's exciting. Prior to COVID-19, we provided information and resources to over 1,000 students and families. We have attended several high schools, career day, and college nights, information sessions, have participated in many meet and greets and funding events. We also hold counseling office hours. Sylvia Lucena Romero would come every Friday to the downtown campus and hold her office hours there. That picture you see there is a picture of our educators group with Scholarships AZ. They actually took a tour when we first opened. Also, we provide training sessions to faculty and staff, and then we've been able to present in a lot of conferences. But most before COVID, we did a conference with the AADE conference, and we presented information about making classrooms more inclusive for immigrant and refugee students. We had our ambassadors provide the personal stories, so that was very impactful because our faculty were very interested in adjusting some of their information on the syllabi. One of our ambassadors, Liam Salami, had mentioned that she was looking for having a quiet space or prayer space. So that was something that we were working on before COVID hit. We also provided training to our tutors, and we partnered up with Scholarships AZ to provide staff with training on working with documented and undocumented students to our student services staff. And then we also hosted the educators conference with Desert Vista campus, and there was over 100 educators in attendance. We plan to do this year, and Sylvia Lucena Romero will be helping us with that. Some of our upcoming projects include, I don't know if you saw in the video, there was a Save the Day, and we're going to be holding a second annual Immigrant and Refugee Resource Fair in partnership with the Lutheran Social Services. We're also discussing opportunities for an internship program with Denise Seaman. We're in the early stages of that discussion. We also are planning to do some work with Adult Education Refugee Program. We want to be able to help students transition into higher ed. So that's something that we're working on. And then another important thing, as all of our panelists have mentioned, is the high school outreach through enrollment program. Our efforts are going to begin pretty soon. We're going to be meeting with counselors and having informational sessions for high school students. And we're going to be talking to them about the dual enrollment program and the opportunities that program offers. and then just making sure they're connecting with the correct advisors for dual enrollment. And that's, you know, we are, the IRSRC has made significant progress in empowering students to pursue their educational dreams and bringing awareness to the college and community regarding the barriers immigrants and refugees face today. Our training offerings and advocacy has created a sense of community, so we're really happy about that. And you know, we take great pride in all of this work, and we know that there's still work to be done. So we invite you to join us, any educators that are out there listening. We invite you to join us as we help students reach their fullest potential and a better tomorrow. That's all I have today. Thank you so much, everybody, for being part of this panel. And our contact information is up there on the screen. Please feel free to call us at any point. We are here for you. We care about you, and we want to help create a better environment for you, and also help you achieve your educational dreams. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yolanda. We appreciate your passion too for helping all of our students and all the work that you do to create a more welcoming environment and a place where we all feel like we belong. So thank you for that. As we get closer to the end of our time together, we have about 20 minutes left on our webinar and want to get to some of your questions today. So let me introduce our next panel, and it is a panel of students that will talk a little bit about their own experiences and how they've been engaged with some of this work. So we have one student that has a recording, and I'll play it at the end if we have time. But before that, we're going to go ahead and talk to Lucero Barraza. She is with Scholarships A to Z. She's one of their executive team members and a student at the University of Arizona. She migrated from Mexico when she was 11 months old. She is a Sunnyside graduate, completed her first year of college at Pima Community College, and then transferred to the University of Arizona in the spring of 2018. She's currently pursuing a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology and hopes to attend graduate school after she graduates next May. She's been volunteering with Scholarships A to Z since 2016 and continues to lead student advocacy efforts through Scholarships A to Z educational programming. And then also our other student that will be speaking today is Janelle Granados. She's volunteered with Scholarships A to Z since 2016. During her time with them, Janelle has been a program coordinator, has created and presented curriculum, run programming, given training to high school and university professionals, and more. She is co-coordinator of the SAC Educators Committee. Janelle completed 2 years of undergraduate studies at Pima Community College, where she earned her associate's degree this last May. Since then, she has transferred to the University of Southern California, where she is pursuing a Master of Arts in Teaching and Progressive degree. So welcome to the both of you. If we can go ahead and start with Lucero, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Lucero Barraza. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and ella. And like Hilda said, I am a DACA recipient. I was born in Tijuana, Mexico, and my parents migrated to the United States when I was 11 months old. So my immigration status didn't really affect me until my senior year of high school, when I found out I did not qualify for financial aid. This kind of threw me into a loop because I didn't know what I was going to do after high school. Fortunately, I was able to apply for DACA in June of 2012, which was the year that I graduated, and I received my first DACA in the fall of 2012. With that, I was able to work and pay out of pocket for my first 2 years at Pima, which was a blessing. After that, in spring of 2013, Pima decided to approve for in-state tuition, which was even better of a help because then I was able to afford a cheaper tuition, which was really helpful for my family. In 2014, my father was detained, and that kind of threw my family into this really hard hardship of like trying to stop his deportation, but we were not successful, and he was later deported. Due to that, I think that kind of ignited something in me, and I decided to become more involved in my community because I wanted to see a change, not just at the educational level, but also at the community level. I joined Scholarships AZ in 2016 and became their community outreach director. That role allowed me to go into high schools in order to present and train educators and better support admin, especially at my own old high school, because I did not have a good experience when it came to supporting from educators. They didn't really know how to support undocumented students, but back in 2012, nothing had really changed by 2016 either. So with that role, I decided to lead efforts in doing presentations and trainings, and I also became involved in the policy changes that was happening at the institutional levels at Pima and at the U of A. Most of my student advocacy work has paralleled with other folks from the org as well, in the fact that we're always trying to change policy at the institutions, and we're always trying to advocate for centers and support. And due to that, it's resulted in the ISRC and at the Irsrc at Pima. We've also been involved in advocating for tuition reduction, especially now since we were then charged with out-of-state tuition. Due to student advocacy, that also allowed the U of A to go to charge folks 150% tuition. So yeah, my role in student advocacy has been due to my own personal needs and also due to my community needs. I like to think that I don't want to leave out folks that aren't just documented. When we focus on a documented narrative, we leave the undocumented folks out, and we also leave our parents out, which is unfortunate. So my student advocacy work has also led to doing community work when it came to the Irsrc program, like Carolina mentioned, and also the Educators Conference and the COVID relief funding support that we're currently doing. Student advocacy is very important. I always encourage students to advocate for themselves, because I think if we would want to see a change, it has to be led by those that are directly impacted, because we're the only ones that would know necessarily what our community and what ourselves need in better supporting our success. But that's without saying that I also think that student advocacy can't really be successful without admin support. And I look at y'all folks on this panelist right now, because I know that y'all are doing great work and have been doing great work for the past couple years, but unfortunately it's not enough, right? Like, due to the fact that not all student population is being completely served, your work isn't finished. So I think it's very important to also bring in that tie into the admin advocacy part as well, right? Like the allyship of educators. When there's a need, there's always room for improvement. So I'm really hopeful to see after this webinar what PCC is doing in order to include student advocates in these conversations of how we can better support our students, because there's a lot of work to do. So, and I'll pass it back to you, Hilda.
Thank you so much. I couldn't get my camera back on here. Thanks for that. Just, you know, so important to hear from our students and the experiences that you all are having, and how our work really impacts all of you. But really your advocacy, your work as activists, also pushes us along to make changes within our organizations, right? So I really appreciate what you all do. And I know that you work hard. And our next person, Janelle, I know is also with Scholarships A to Z and has really been engaged with a lot of activism work, including participating with myself and Yolanda at the Capitol Forum, where we talked with legislators at the national level about how some of these issues are impacting our students here locally. So now I'll turn it over to you, Janelle.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. As Hilda mentioned, my name is Janelle. My pronouns are she, her, hers, ella, and I graduated in May from Pima, and I'm at the University of Southern California now remotely. And so my involvement with Scholarships AZ began in 2016, right around the time that I was kind of learning about my status and what that meant. And as Lucero mentioned, it really became a problem in my senior year when I was trying to figure out what to do after high school. And so I want to share this because I think it's important to remember, right, that just because I'm following, right, a very traditional path of doing 2 years at community college and then transferring to university, that doesn't mean that it's true for every student, especially students who hold a documented or undocumented background, right? Because higher education is just really inaccessible for that population. And so I just want to acknowledge, right, that just because this is like my experience doesn't mean it's every other student's experience, and we shouldn't hold those expectations, right? Or ever say that just because this student did it, you can do it. And so I definitely owe lots of my success to folks that I've been connected with. So as I mentioned, I started to work with Scholarships AZ back in like 2016, and thanks to them, I was able to connect, right, with educators and counselors who I was to talk to, who were going to help me, enroll in school or find scholarships and review my essays and all these things, right, that helped me get to where I am now. And so really, I'm here today to talk about one of my favorite things that I did at Scholarships AZ is working with educators. I am studying myself to become an elementary school teacher, but for the time being, I really enjoy working with educators in higher education and working to make our schools more accessible, because education is a right, and unfortunately, it's being treated like a privilege. So I want to share with y'all, right, some of these resources, some of the things that we do at Scholarships AZ, specifically working with educators, because as was mentioned before, right, we need the educator allyship. Students absolutely have the autonomy and the power and the resilience to overcome, right, the very unfortunate barriers that are placed in our ways, and oftentimes without, right, we don't even like want these, right, like we don't even know, and there, right, so many decisions are made regardless of what we think, what we want, what we need, and so this educator allyship is really important in helping students who can already do so much and helping them get even further, opening those doors up and really just being there for the student and whatever it is they need. Because yeah, the work isn't done. There's lots of room to grow. And so I know that y'all already do so much, right? In these positions that are often, looked down on or just not properly funded. And so I am aware of that, right? And I also know that our students are suffering. And so at Scholarships AZ, as Carolina mentioned before, we do annual educators conferences. This year we took a break because of COVID, but as we're kind of re-envisioning these things, I again would encourage you to follow us on social media and stay connected and right for whenever those things come out, and as we kind of re-envision what it's going to look like now remotely. I would love for y'all to be there, Provost and Chancellor, right, and everyone else every other educator on this call, right, because it's very important information. And also have an educators committee at Scholarships AZ that meets. We were doing like monthly meetings, and then we did bi-weekly during quarantine earlier this year when we just needed community, right? And so these spaces are really whatever our educators need. We have lots of members on the committee, educators from high school and higher education institutions, such as Hilda, Yolanda. Sylvia has been at a couple as well, and tons of our high school counselors as well. So these are a really great space to connect with other educators in town and kind of talk and process about these things that you're going through in your institution, as well as learning more resources and just really trying to understand our holistic students. And so I know I'm coming up short on my time, but I would love to engage and get some commitments, right, from the provost and chancellor, right, to increase this commitment to undocumented students, specifically at Pima, right, because as we heard, DACA isn't the answer, right, and it's just now even a lot harder for students to gain this protection. So I think we really need to expand our conversation to include undocumented students, right? So I'd love to see an increased commitment from Pima to undocumented students. And this also means to have these efforts led by those who are directly impacted, led and compensated, right? I think some great places to start is having the Irsrc space physically expanded, because I know those spaces are very small cubicles, right? And so our students deserve an actual space, a center. I was at that campus, and the only reason why I knew of the office was because I knew Yolanda and Hilda, right? And so, right, I mean, I just think you have to support the student, our holistic student, right? And so having a space for them where they can go hang out, do homework is going to be so essential and vital, right? Just like the other spaces that are on campus, we need to do the same thing for our immigrant and refugee students. I know we talked a little bit about at the beginning how Maricopa community colleges do the 150% tuition rate. This is a conversation that I'd love to revisit and talk about more, because I don't quite understand why Maricopa can do that but not Pima, right? And so I think as we kind of talk about that, I think another great solution to this would be to create more scholarships that are open to undocumented students, and allocate some of those fiscal funds, right, to provide that money for students who deserve to be in school and get through school. Lots of other ideas, and I'm happy to connect with you all later. We can talk about these things, but thank you all so much for your time, and I'm excited to see what else Pima will do, Chancellor and Provost. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janelle. I appreciate your advocacy and your really respectful way that you're, again, advocating and pushing for us to do more. In our chat, there's a commitment from our provost to be committed and to do more. So I think the voice of students is of utmost importance in all of these conversations. So I thank you both, Lucero and Janelle, for being with us today. So in our last few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Sylvia Lustenau, to do a quick presentation on some of our mental health resources at Pima Community College. I would provide you with her very amazing, brilliant introduction of her bio, but now we are running really short on time, so I'll just turn it right over to you, Sylvia.
I think that's fair. Hi, everyone, and I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. Sylvia Lustenau Romero. I'm a counselor primarily pre-COVID times, housed at the Desert Vista campus. I'm really excited to be here and to see Janelle and to see Lucero and everyone, and meet Reina and see Carolina and just all of our colleagues here, because this is such important work. Briefly, I am the daughter of immigrants. My dad went to Pima to get his air conditioning certification. Bet you didn't know that, did you, bosses? Right? My mom worked for Pima College Adult Education until she retired. I'm a first-generation college student, and just growing up and going to the Sunnyside School District and graduating from Desert View High School, going back to college, starting at Pima, I should say, a few years after high school, and then going for my master's and now my doctorate. Throughout my experience, I've seen have had the privilege of working with students who are of mixed immigration status families, who are undocumented, who are documented. And every time I get to meet a student like this, I am trained even more, right? So my skill set expands even more. So in no way do I ever want to come across as the expert, because the students are the experts on their lives, their situations, and they are so powerful, and they've taught me so much about how I can better serve them. And so I think for myself, and using my privilege as a counselor here with Pima is to ask my leadership, hey, we need to hire some more of these folks for training, right? We need Scholarships AZ to come back and train a small group of counselors or the small group of program advisors, because we need to have these conversations. And I'm so grateful that Provost and Chancellor are willing to support our students, because you know, I can go get my master's in counseling, and I can get my doctorate in educational leadership, but both areas were lacking on how to better serve our students from the immigrant community still. So if we can do that, I think that we're going to really be helping our students. I wanted to share briefly here a presentation, and let's see if I can figure out how to do this, because they showed me how to do this earlier. And if I learned correctly, then I'll know how to do it again. All right, so just a quick thank you to Dr. Jeff Tees, who made the space for fellow counselor Erica Elias and I to promote this professional development for our faculty colleagues. Just wanted to let folks know, you know, when it comes to, I think I'm having trouble here. Let me see if I can, here we go. When it comes to our student challenges, many of our faculty, many of our advisors, counselors know that our students sometimes, many times will struggle with paying for school, will struggle with adequate childcare, adequate food supplies. Now with COVID, limited access to public Wi-Fi areas. I'll use Starbucks, right? When's the last time you saw one of those seating areas open? A lot of times our students without internet at home, that's where they would go. All of those, and on top of that, there's this constant immigration pressure. Daca Roadblocks, current administration's throwing up more and more roadblocks between immigrant folks and Daca credentials. Asylum seekers, even those who are permanent residents, there's that constant stress, fear, and insecurity hanging over our students' head, in addition to many, many other challenges that our students have. And regardless of that, they are still coming to school, working. Many times it's our Daca recipient who's the primary source of income for the entire family. Now in these times of even more targeted and anti-immigrant sentiment that we've seen in the community, in the nation, the Daca recipient sometimes is the person who feels the safest going to work and traveling outside of the home. So just additional, you know, awareness amongst us as workers to let us, you know, just be aware that it's rough, right? It's rough. One of the things that Pima has offered now to all students as of July 1, 2019 is the Student Wellness Assistance Program, which many times we'll hear it be referred to as SWA, and students can access it by going into their My Pima accounts, clicking on students, scrolling down, clicking on student resources, and then clicking on the Student Wellness Assistance resource. Don't be turned off by the 800 number. Clinical professional is waiting for you on the other line and will help you set up either in person, more likely now telephone, or via Google Meets or Skype or something, one-on-one counseling sessions. Free of cost for our Pima students. Important to know that students can have access to this counseling program 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, immediate, and 6 free counseling sessions per problem per year. So this is really important for us to share with our students, our community members, dual enrollment students too. You're a Pima student, so this applies to you. In addition to that one-on-one counseling, the Student Wellness Assistance also has many different areas of excellent pieces of information, articles, audio recordings, even some short webinars that are pre-recorded for students to access. And so I just copied a paste of the parenting area that the Student Wellness Assistance will offer here, and just to encourage folks to continue to explore that. We also have our 10 academic counselors for Pima College as well. We primarily assist students in making sure they understand all facets of their program of study, including how to be successful as they're working towards those programs or those certificates and degrees. And that could be anything from a really important lesson on how to manage your time, whereas for other students, it's all about test anxiety. So I always like to tell our students, if anything's getting in the way of you being successful at Pima, that's an okay thing to come and talk to a Pima counselor about. And as Yolanda had said, was really lucky to have leadership who was supportive in having me go to the downtown campus on Friday afternoons to provide walk-in services for our students utilizing the Immigrant Refugee Student Resource Center. We also have career counselors at Pima, and students who are unsure about how or what to study or what they're passionate about, or even more, even if I get XYZ certificate, if I'm undocumented, how am I going to work, right? Those conversations need to happen. They need to be normalized up front. And we as counselors need that training from the experts. Scholarships AZ, Aliento, United, We Dream. That's not something they teach at NAU, right? That's not something they teach at the U of A. As far as I know, I never had a class on that. I would love one. Okay? So I need our folks here, Carolina, Lucero, Reina, to continue to train us. I always like to highlight the additional resources in the community. University of Arizona, their CUP clinics, commitment to underserved people, are very important, and things that we will also utilize with our undocumented students or students who are uninsured. DACA students frequently don't have insurance. They don't qualify for access, so we still need resources such as these. So there's these CUP clinics, women's health, family medicine, SHOT clinics. There is even the latest, the integrative medicine clinic, and specifically for students who are uninsured. It's not often you can get acupuncture unless you have the discretionary income to pay for that, right? So when we have partners in the community like the U of A, whose professionals and graduate students are providing these services, very important. The Mind Clinic is another mental health provider with the University of Arizona. Graduate students supervised, and counseling, I should say, supervised by professional counselors and faculty at the U of A. There is pretty much a 3-month waiting list, but it's a really useful and free resource. And when medication and therapy or therapy are prescribed, this is a free area or free resource for students to get a hold of that. We will also partner and refer students to the Crisis Response Center 24 hours a day. Brief overview on the Crisis Response Center. Many times students, even students with private insurance, sometimes students have private insurance through employers. They're frequently the only person in the family that has insurance, and asking their parent, hey, how do I get therapy? It's not a resource for these students. So going to the CRC and knowing that they can help a student navigate their private insurance is a really wonderful thing, a source of support for our students. As counselors, we know, well, I know, I should say, that it's important when I am going to refer a student to a resource that I call the resource first and say, hey, person over there giving away the supplies with pet assistance. Is it okay for students who are undocumented to come and get those resources, right? If I go to the homeless shelter and I ask there, is it okay for undocumented people. It's incumbent upon me to learn about those barriers before I send the student off to those resources. I can't imagine the harm that is done even more to a student who's already in crisis if I send them to a homeless shelter only for that student to then be turned away and or potentially discriminated to additional kinds of discrimination, bullying, the threat of law enforcement being called in. So that is something that, again, you don't learn that, right? In graduate school, we learned this from the Luceros and the Janelles and the Carolinas and the Reinas. Those are the folks that have the knowledge. If there's anything I would say on my wish list of going to graduate school and going to counselor school, I like to call it, is having access to the experts to teach us. And so Pima, I know that you can do this. You can totally help us get these experts on board. I think that is all I have. I just want to kind of shout out with the additional laptops. All students, we have a finite number of laptops and internet hotspots that we can loan to students for the semesters, many basic skills videos and tech support. And these additional resources are going to be provided for you all with this. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. You are such a great colleague and such wonderful support for all of our students. Our panelists are all clapping for you and lots of shout outs in our chat for the work that you're doing. Snaps to everybody. So thank you. Thanks to all of our panelists and for sticking with us, you know, for this over hour and a half that we've had together. We knew it wouldn't be enough time. There's so much information to share and to discuss. I've tried to answer all of the different questions in the Q&A, type them out. Sent you some links and resources to answer those questions. We have recorded this session and we'll be posting it on our website. If you go to the pima.edu website and to student resources, the Irsrc, the Immigrant and Refugee Student Resource Center, is listed there, and we will have it posted along with some FAQs, frequently asked questions, to try to get more information out there. And then just keep your eyes out for information that we'll be sharing as policy changes continue to come our way. It is really important work that we're trying to do with all of you and with all of our wonderful partners that have been here today. So again, thank you for joining us today. Please look at the Q&A for the answers to your different questions, and we appreciate all of you just getting more familiar with this. Thanks so much, everyone, and good night.